dark shadows and in the white cold, fearlessly we search for knowledge new and old. We drink the strong spirits and read the ancient tomes. The order of the Abracast, we are the brave and bold. If emotion is conceptualized as a psychological construct, the media psychological origins of our discipline offer a good starting point for this review about media and emotions. In 1916, in the context of his psychological studies on films, Munsterberg, which is an awesome name, realized the need to distinguish empathic sympathy for protagonists as well as the projection of personal feelings of the protagonist from reactions to the protagonist's emotions. Psychological research on radio broadcasting emerged in 1930. Beyond audience ratings and the coverage, they extended their studies to the emotional aspects of reception, the emotional gratification, and the impact of radio usage. A famous study, too, showed that emotional aspects like identification with radio soap characters are central gratification in radio usage and contribute to the success of radio programs. From about 1950 on, research on TV became more important than psychological research on films. Here, the research questions changed fundamentally. The first experimental studies in the laboratory had been conducted in the 30s, but they gained a particular political relevance in the work of the Yale group, led on basis of stimulus response logic. The group investigated the effects of fear appeals on attitudes towards the war. Inspired by the cognitive shift in psychology during the 60s and 70s, communication research increased focused on the psychological process during media reception. The emotion philosophical theories underlying this approach, however, differed fundamentally from each other. For example, Zillman developed his own three-factor theory of emotion on the basis of Shatner's and Singler's two-factor models of emotion. Zillman's theory laid out the foundation for his more specific theories, such as the excitation transfer theory, the mood management theory. Zillman there's extra ends at the end here. His work and his theories had a central and sustainable impact on the emotion psychological communication research throughout the past 30 years. And in the 70s, Zillman and other media psychologists began to professionalize research on, quote, media and emotions, unquote. Thus, the research groups from around Schramm and Wirth developed sociological measures such as the amplitude of the pulse, volume, or the heart rate indicators of emotional aspects of media reception. In this context, the discovery of the missing half second became legendary. The media reception people miss about half of a second in order to process information as they do outside the media. The cognitive processing of the media content is impaired by the emotional aspects predominate more and more. In the 70s, on the first special editions of journals, as well as monographs emerged, which explicitly included words such as emotion and entertainment in its title. In the 80s, one could observe an increasingly institutionalization of media psychology. This tendency fostered psychological research questions, and in the way these questions concern the topic of media and emotions. Research in the 80s and 90s continually drew on fundamental research on the psychology of emotions. Thus, many communication researchers with backgrounds in media psychology refer to Schur's cognitive appraisal theory. Recent communication research has developed some theoretical proposals about the role emotions in media, about the role of emotions in media consumption. This, as well as the reading for this whole episode, is coming from Media and Emotions, Werner, Wirth, and Holger, Schramm. I found it in the Center for the Study of Communications and Culture, 2005.
The Abercast. Occult. History. Conspiracy. And violence.
All right. Hello. Good evening, everybody. I'll be your media emotional manipulator for the evening. My name is John Towers, and you have clicked on to a fabulous podcast called The Abercast, where we talk all about the occult and history and conspiracy and violence and how the media manipulates us. We haven't done a media episode in quite a while, so I thought it was fitting. And also, we've been doing a lot of hocus pocus, so just shift gears a little bit. I thought we would sink our teeth into this topic. A few weeks ago on the show, I can't even remember which show it was. I record these in advance, so it was probably quite a long time ago. So I can't remember which show it was, but I mentioned this Ralph Waldo Emerson quote: "Heroism feels and never reasons, therefore it is always right." And I've really been thinking about this since I brought it up on the show, because when I was a dopey kid, I used to believe that. Like, I would write it on my school notebook, like, Johnny loves Amy. And then, heroism feels and never reasons, therefore it's always right. And then down towards the bottom would be like some Public Enemy lyrics or something. So, I really got behind that, and it became like sort of like a motto for me or whatever. That's why I'm able just to like recall it. I even had it written on the wall of my bedroom in high school. So I thought, it was pure truth. I thought it was a gem. I thought it was a wise, thing. And now, as a grown up, I think it's a real girly way to look at the world, It's a real kind of millennial way to like bump through life, stopping and taking selfies with your mouth all hanging wide open. You know how guys are doing this? Like, if you look on Instagram, guys are like their smile is that they're just opening their mouth real wide. And I'm like, what is that all about? It's like they're out on Forbes Avenue open for business. You know what I mean? Anyways, I feel like we've kind of danced around in the media episodes. We've kind of danced around this issue a lot, especially in our media gratification, episode. A lot of our talks about media and media manipulation, we kind of brush up against this topic. So I did some digging around, and I found this great piece on media and emotions, or I should say emotions in the media. We're going to start here, but going forward through this whole ordeal, we're going to talk a lot about emotions, different emotions, and the piece that we were talking about tonight doesn't specifically mention outrage. But in the era that we are living in today, like we are living in outrage hell. Outrage hell. It's brought to us upon, it's brought to our doorstep by social media. So I know that I'm talking to the choir here. I know you bros know what I'm talking about, but I'm hoping that we can move through our daily lives and, while we're looking at our screens and our phones and our tablets and our TVs and our computers, and while we are moving through our lives absorbing all this media and the news and the fucking TV shows and the goddamn video clips on Facebook, people are or YouTube, people are worried about Google AI ruling the world, and I'm like, they're worried about AI ruling the world, and I'm like, my YouTube can figure out what ads I want to listen to based on what I'm searching, I guess, or whatever, but it can't take the hint that I don't want to watch Seth Meyers, fucking Jimmy Kimmel, and fucking Trevor, whoever this fucking D-bag is. It can't figure out that I don't want to watch these clips. No matter how many times a day I click the not interested button, it can't fucking figure it out. I'm watching my blood pressure again. So I gotta. News, TV shows, video clips on Facebook and YouTube, all of it. Newspapers, just all of it. Don't let any sort of media event pass your scrutiny. I want you to sit with the video or the show or the movie or whatever the fuck it is, and I want you to register it. I want you to be present with the media that you're looking at. And maybe going forward, we could say, make a little vestibule in your mind to go into and say, how does this make me feel? How do you think it's supposed to make me feel? How do you think it would make my girlfriend or my boyfriend or my wife or my husband feel? And then kind of pick it apart. My wife's really good at this, by the way. She's like, what is, we're like watching like whatever TV show, and she's really good at picking apart commercials. She's really good at it. Probably, almost better than I am at it. But, so this is the time in the show where I invite you guys that are playing at home to man your mason jar and adhere to the formula. I want you to get some, just jam it just full of ice cubes. And I'm talking about the big boy mason jar. I mean, not like the pickle jar mason jar, like they got the big pickle jar mason jars, but like with a big boy. Fit like a whole tray of ice in there and like a slice of lime. And then like do 2 shots of like the most kerosene gin you could find. Put 2 shots in there and then fill the rest of it up with tonic water. And may God have mercy on your soul. Cheers. Here's to everybody. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for this support. This is going to be, it's going to be something else. Dimensions of media emotions. The emotions that develop during media reception do not differ fundamentally from everyday situations not influenced by media. According to cognitive emotion theories, we conceptualize media emotions as a result of a normal or unconscious appraisal process. During this so-called appraisal process, we test perceived media objects, events, and situations with respect to their novelty, pleasantness, goal attainability, copability, and compatibility with the norms. The result of this multi-step appraisal process produces specific response philosophical physiological responses, motor expression, action tendencies, feelings, or specific media emotions. If one knows the result of every single appraisal step, one can predict the specific media emotion which finally results even before reception, depending on whether the appraisal steps refer primarily to the person, him or herself, or to the media person. The ego emotions or co-emotions result. These are also called socio-emotions. A politician's proposition does not itself have to be articulated angrily, but it can nevertheless evoke or induce anger on the basis of evaluation by the recipient according to his or her own goals or values. In this kind of emotional process, we are talking of emotion induction, a second prototypical class of emotional process during the media reception is an emotional contagion. Here, the recipient only perceives the emotional expressive behavior of a media person and imitates it, without understanding in detail how the emotional expressions of the media person may have developed. The thing that this reminds me of is I can't remember the specific thing. But I can't remember what had happened in the news. But Colbert and Jon Stewart on his show, and they were like, look, the president did this. It's, and the media or the audience started clapping, and Jon Stewart had to be like, no, you guys don't understand. This is bad, and this is why, you idiots. You know what I mean? It's like a backfiring of that. Instead of the recipient, grabbing on to the emotion of the presenter, they did not whatever. The third category is empathy or empathic sympathy with the media person. Here, the recipient, him or herself, is not affected by the event that evokes the media person's emotions. However, he or she tries to follow the alleged appraisals or appraisal steps leading to the emotion experienced by the media person. Maybe that's closer to the example that I tried to state, that abortion of an example, that I tried to state, the miscarriage of the abortion that I tried to state for the last one. The three categories of emotional process described here happen in a similar manner during everyday confrontations with non-media persons and situations. In the case of the media reception, however, there are additional appraisal levels, and such as evaluations of formal attributes of the program or its genre, or considerations about the potential co-audience who may themselves produce their own emotions, and combinations with the emotions contribute to the overall experience of what the media have to offer. Empathy. Empathy has become an important construct in mass communication research. I'll say, I can't even hear Sarah McLachlan anymore without being like, oh my God, those fucking poor dogs. It has been used to explain both children and adults' reactions to films and characters, enjoyment of films, responses to co-viewing others, and the attraction to different programs. Empathy is a complex concept with affective as well as cognitive components. Cognitive empathy is the understanding of other persons in a rational reconstruction of another person's feelings, in the sense of taking over that person's perspective. Affective empathy, in contrast, is relatively primitive process of sympathizing with other individuals. Affective Empathy occurs, for example, when the recipients sense more or less the same emotions they have observed in their media figure. Empathy need not involve an exact match in emotions between the observers and the observed, so long as the valence of emotion does match. You're on the same quadrant of the spectrum. In his affective disposition theory, which was developed for narrative plots, Zillman, we're back to the Zillman, assumes that empathic emotions have their origin in the observation of protagonists by the recipient. During this observation, the protagonist's actions in the film are subject to the spectator's moral judgment and subsequently either approve or disapprove. So there you go. There's the valence. You're either on board or you're off board. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for that. Just trying to find my place again. I made that drink fucking strong, bros. And approval leads to positive, affective dispositions towards the protagonist, i.e. the recipients find him likable and are subsequently concerned with his well-being. A disapproval, in contrast, leads to negative, affective dispositions towards the protagonist. This does go along with the refusal and condemnation of the action of this person. Zillman's assumption is that spectators would either sympathize empathetically with the protagonist because of these evaluations, or in case of refusal, sense counter empathy towards the protagonist. Is of particular interest for psychology. According to Zillman, the recipient is a witness or an observer to the media event. The observation of this event leads to empathetic feelings towards the likable protagonist whose actions are approved, or to gloating over the antagonist whose actions are disapproved. The spectator anticipates a very specific continuation or ending of the film. The spectator hopes for a particular kind of continuation or ending in which the protagonist can gain victory and the antagonist will fail. The spectator fears a course of events resulting in damage to the hero of the film and the triumphant for the antagonist. Reception experiences like the experience of excitation can be explained by this model, as can disappointment or relief experience at the end of the film if hopes and anxieties are fulfilled or disillusioned, respectively. So I know that we're talking about, specifically, we're talking about films here, which is, I think it is important, but I think that these... Oh boy, the way that these stories are constructed carry through to the news and even to commercials and even to YouTube videos, news snippets or whatever. They tell the story. And that's all that they're really talking about here, is using a narrative to evoke emotions. So we're talking about a film, but there's ways to do it in, how long are fucking commercials? I don't know. How long are commercials? 30 seconds, 60 seconds? I don't know. But I watch commercials that make me feel emotions all the time. Usually they're gross out emotions, but I am a sucker, I've mentioned, for the soldiers surprising their families by coming home. Those fucking get me all the time, and I'm fucking being manipulated every fucking time I see it. So that's what I'm saying, is like, next time that we watch a commercial or next time we watch a news segment or whatever, take that emotion and think about it, put it in your mind's eye and spin it around, throw it in that vestibule we talked about in your mind, and ask some questions about it to yourself. we might learn something about ourselves this way. And if we do dissect these things, we are certainly going to, if we don't learn more about ourselves, we're certainly going to learn more about the people that are manipulating our emotions with it. I always think of that, we've talked about it in one of the social media episodes about Facebook doing that experiment, that mood altering experiment, where it was in the piece that I read was in the UK Guardian, but they took a chunk of their users and they only showed them what they thought was like negative stuff, and then they monitored the stuff that they posted, and of course the stuff that they posted was all negative stuff because they're just being bombarded with all this negativity. So the idea was that they were able to affect your mood, the mood of the person. And I thought that was unethical. And I said I actually would like to see, I would actually like to know about the group of people they selected for this. And if any of them, I don't know, like look at suicides or crazy crime stuff or whatever that happened in that amount of time. Those are questions I think we should be asking. Or not, whatever. Which leads me to the next part, mood regulation. Moods are more or less desired or pleasant and are therefore consistently regulated. In his mood management theory, Zillman explains while entertaining media programs can particularly help mood regulation, the theory based on the fundamental premise that humans are hedonistic beings. Oh, he's a Freudian who strive to optimize their mood state. And so they deign their environment in such a way that positive moods are maintained and intensified and bad moods are avoided or reduced. Yeah, I think that makes sense. When I'm like bugging out over bills and stuff, I'm like, hey, I need to find a fucking funny TV show. Where's Billy Madison at? And so, by design, their environment is such a way that positive moods are maintained or intensified, and bad moods are avoided and reduced. That's right. My wife and I both know where to put the bills, so I don't fucking see them when I walk in. Spectators normally turn their attention to the media programs with which they have had positive experiences in the past, which had a positive effect on their mood. By experiencing this positive effect again and again, humans unconsciously learn to choose the same media programs in comparable situations. This is weird. I'm actually looking at this now because I am a guy who will watch the same movie that I love over and over again, but I don't want to watch new shit. Like if I think a new movie sucks, like I won't even give it a shot. But I'm like, hey, when Easter rolls around, my favorite Easter movie, Aliens, 100%. Put it in. I used to think that Die Hard was my favorite Christmas movie. This is the point of my life where I'm having a problem. Because I was like, I'm a Marvel comic nerd my whole entire life, and everybody else was like calling me a nerd and stuff all the time. I like horror movies my whole entire life, and everyone's like, you're weird all the fucking time. I like Star Wars is an integral part of my life, and everyone else is like, God, quit playing with these action figures. You're fucking 15 years old, and now you turn around and the whole world is obsessed with all these same things. And now I'm like, I don't want to have anything to do with it. Fuck all of you guys. That's what happened to Die Hard for easily 20 years. Die Hard was like my Christmas jam. And now everyone's like, oh, look, I got a John McClane fucking Christmas ornament for my tree. And oh, look, even the writer says it's a fucking Christmas movie. And now I don't want anything to do with it. So now, at Christmas time, I watch Die Hard 2 it's a far more superior Christmas movie. It's not a far more superior movie, but it's a far more superior Christmas movie. I got to get back on this. I fucked myself over with this drink. Empirically well-founded, the theory's fundamental core propositions are established not only by experiments in Zillman's tradition, but also a quasi-experimental and correlative design. 3 of these studies will be discussed as examples. Their well-known experiment in mood management. Oh, he's got a friend at this time. Bryant and Zillman showed that this is interesting. Showed that bored persons consumed exciting programs longer than did stressed persons. Similarly, stressed subjects consumed relaxing programs longer than did bored persons. Additionally, heart rate measurements as indicators or arousal showed that bored persons could regulate their arousal level through exciting programs, and stressed persons could relate their arousal levels down to a pleasant neutral level by quiet, relaxing programs. In contrast, by bored persons who saw primarily relaxing programs that did not succeed in doing this. So what would a quiet program be that a stressed person can watch and chill out? I'm thinking like American Pickers, but they even have like some stressful moments where they're like bickering, like they're trying to get they're negotiating their prices. But I mean, it's about junk. So I guess it's not that crazy, right? So American Pickers is probably one of these things that stressed people can watch to chill out, especially if they like history stuff, which is why I sometimes go on a bender of American Pickers. Yeah, so that's weird, that bored, because obviously there's way more exciting TV shows than there are boring TV shows out there, right? I would think that. What are you guys' thoughts about this? Do you watch something specifically if you're stressed and you want to calm down? Now, it's interesting that they were saying, like, if you had troubled times in your past and a show's gotten you through something, that you go back to it over and over again, because I'll watch MASH any fucking day of the week. And like, I had a pretty troubled childhood, and that's what my granddad watched all the time. And like, like Steinfeld, I'll put Steinfeld on all the time. So yeah, that's interesting to think about. What do you guys have any stories about anything like that you might be able to relate to? Let me know if you do, if you want to talk about it. I'm here. I'll talk about it with you if you're interested. Corresponding to the correlative MMT study, Anderson, Collins, Schmidt, and Jekovitz investigated a correlation between a mode of TV usage and stressful everyday events via diaries and telemetric observation data. According to predictions of MMT, the most stressful the normal course of life was. Women as well as men watched more comedy and less news and documentaries. They need to update this, because I don't think people are watching the news at all anymore. I think social media has changed all of this news watching business. The young people that I don't have access to young people. The young people that I speak to get their news from, oh God, I don't want to sound like I'm a crotchety old man, right? But they get their news from YouTube clips, Facebook clips. They get their news from Jon Stewart and Noah Trevor. They get their news from Stephen Colbert, which is it's hilarious. But that's how they're consuming their news. Liberals are not consuming their news on cable news. You just look at the ratings at CNN. They're laughable. And you always wonder, like, when, well, you don't wonder, I mean, you know, but like when there's a big budget Hollywood movie and they're like, oh, we have to have a a cable news clip in here to have some kind of exposition about something, they always choose CNN. And you're like, why? No one is watching CNN. Like, that's the most people watch CNN ever. Another interesting thing about all this mood media stuff is let's see, I'm not sure how I should put this. Have you ever watched the Weather Channel? The Weather Channel is terrifying. And I'm going to withhold the reason that I watch the Weather Channel or why I'm exposed to it daily. But there is a certain reason that I get to see the Weather Channel many times every day. And whenever I see it, it's always awful. They're always talking about awful fucking shit. It's never like, hey, it's going to be a great day out. It's always like Snowmageddon. Be careful. This is what you need to check for with your tire pressure. And watch out. Don't look up in the sky when hail is falling because there's a 28%, 53% chance that a hail ball can actually fall right into your eye. Like, it's all this awful nonsense. And I look at the colors that they use for their stuff, and it's always like dire. And it's like the stupidest thing. It's like, you want to know how, what the weather is like? Just look at the fucking sky. How long have you lived on the planet? Just look at the goddamn sky and you'll see what it's gonna be like. Do I need to grab a jacket? What time of year is it? Is it winter? Is it spring? Is it summer? Is it fall? Look outside. Is it raining? Is it fucking snowing? Is it hailing? Are fucking piranhas falling from it? Well, I don't know about piranhas, but there's reports that frogs fall from skies apparently. So are there fucking frogs falling from the skies? What's your commute like? Can you see the fucking road? Is there fucking ice? It's the most benign nonsense. But they have to sell those ads, boy. Man. God, I gotta fucking take a break because example of a correlative study is quite famous. Female students had to imagine that they watched TV for 3 hours on a free evening, and then they could choose between comedy, game shows, and drama from a number of program descriptions. After that, they were asked in which phase of the menstrual cycle they were in. Consistent with the MMT, the preference for comedy was highest at the end of the menstrual cycle, which during menstruation and the phase immediately before, which the mood was worse. while the preference for game shows and drama was independent of the position within the menstrual cycle. Wow. I must not have read that when I was going through this. However, not all empirical results confirm MMT studies. Studies have shown that people do not always strive for mood. I don't know what this word is. Amelioration by media reception, and that they were therefore intentionally choose negative, stressful media programs. They found evidence that TV often goes along with I don't know what this fucking word is either, exacerbation of the mood state, particularly because the recipients had sometimes have a bad conscience while TV watching, and believe, fuck, I'm butchering this. They found evidence that TV often goes along with exacerbation of the mood state, especially because the recipients sometimes have a bad conscience while TV watching and believe that they should use their spare time, quote, in a better way, unquote. Moreover, mood amelioration is highly dependent on specific personality traits. Besides, Schramm and Wirth emphasize that one has to distinguish between the regulation of moods and of emotions, in contrast to the unconscious process during mood regulations modeled by Zillman. It can be assumed that emotions find their ways into the consciousness of the recipient because of their intensity and are subsequently regulated in a more conscious manner. Two, additionally, not only mechanisms of selection, but also cognitive strategies are particularly important during the regulation of media emotions. If, for example, a horror film arouses anxiety, the recipients can regulate their anxiety by recalling more strongly that they are only dealing with the film and not reality, which is the therapeutic thing about good horror movies is it lets you become a voyeur. You're experiencing these awful things without actually having to fucking experience it, you know. Besides the hedonistic motive, one should take into particular consideration the instrumental motive or eudaimonic incentive for action. Well, all right, let's try it. We're going to do one more. Arousal and excitation. Another strand of research studies emotions during media reception by the continuous registration of various psychological measures of arousal. Using this technique, physiological arousal serves as an indicator to certain emotions and is therefore assumed to be a component of emotions. The excitation transfer theory relates to emotional experience of media programs to arousal. Ultimately, the theory postulates that recipients transfer their residual arousal from previous sequences to later sequences because physiological arousal recedes relatively slowly. Cognitions, on the other hand, do not have to recede, but can be changed from sequence to sequence. Consequently, the cognition of later sequences is not only associated with the arousal from the particular sequence, but with the residual arousal from previous sequences too. The cognition and cumulative arousal results in an effect that will be stronger the greater the arousal and was transferred from the previous sequence. The idea that cognition and arousal are the two fundamental components of affects can be tracked back to the two-factor model of emotions by Schachter and Singer, which we talked about briefly towards the beginning. Accordingly to this model, persons attributed unspecific arousal to stimuli in their immediate environment and experience a certain kind of effect afterwards. The effect may be considered a function of physiological state of arousal, of cognition, appropriate to the state of arousal. The intensity of effects will be interpreted in accordance with the degree of arousal. The excitation transfer model has an interesting implication for experiencing exciting and arousing films. According to Zillman's theory, arousal is reduced only slowly, except for in one case, I would imagine. The evaluation, in contrast, can change suddenly. It is possible, for instance, that the cognitive registration of a sudden happy ending is attributed to the residual arousal built up in prior sequences of the film. and it appears as a strongly positive emotion or euphoric feeling. For many recipients, this phenomenon should be well known from their own experience with typical Hollywood films. This is like revenge films for me. I fucking love it. And when the bad guy gets it at the end, huge boner. In horror films, these positive endings do not usually exist. What? This leads to there's always a positive ending. All right. For the most part. Right? The final girl wins? This leads to the question of why individuals get involved with this kind of media program. A possible explanation could be that an arousal level sensed is very pleasant when watching horror films. Another explanation is that recipients want to reduce their anxiety in real life by consciously seeking contact with even more anxiety arousing horror films, or want to learn how to cope with these anxieties. And that is my thesis on why the Human Centipede movies were so popular in the Obama presidency. I am John Towers. This has been the Abercast. Hey, really, hit me up if you have any ideas about this, or especially the watching comedies and stuff when you're stressed versus, The Shield or something. Not the Agents of Shield. I'm talking about not the Agents of Shield. It's like the biggest waste of potential in the universe. Just wow. It's so depressing what they did with that show. Anyhow, I'm not talking about Shield. That Shield. I'm talking about The Shield with Michael Chiklis. I don't even remember where I was going with this. I watch that shit all the time because I like to see people get their asses whipped. Just like, same thing with, I'd like to bounce this up against like a show like 24, which is like all tension, all violence, and all craziness. What was the, societal indicator? What was happening in the world? We're dealing with the Iraq war. We're dealing with post 9/11, and people are rushing to watch this. It seems counterintuitive to the kind of stuff that we're talking about in this study. So yeah, I would like to know what you guys think about all this stuff. I mean, I assume that we all watch TV. When my wife moved in, she was very unhappy. I had basic cable. All I could afford was basic cable. And I would get up early on the weekend and watch C-SPAN. And she's like, we've got to do something about that. Anyhow, I'm John Towers. This is the Abercast. And let me know what you guys think about this. I think it's an interesting topic. And I only got a quarter of the way through my stack here, so I'm sure we will be revisiting this in weeks to come. Hey guys, it's John. I just wanted to remind you to check out The American Sermon. It's a limited series podcast. This is the last month. It's ending, where we're talking about the occult foundations of the United States. If you like the show, you'll definitely like that. So check her out wherever for most places you can find podcasts. And if you're interested in supporting the show, please head over to Subscribestar. It's subscribestar.com/Abercast, and it's a Patreon alternative in the fact of the techno censorship over there at Patreon. We went ahead and we got out of Dodge, and we're over at Subscribestar now. Subscribestar.com/Abercast. Give it a check out. Get over there, check out our tiers and shit. Don't forget to go to abercast.com. Social media links are there. Sign into the mailing list for some bonus content. The website also has a featured topic link, so you can just search whatever you're interested in and find all the shows pertaining to that right there. It's pretty nifty. And don't forget to check out the Abercast Facebook page. I'm pretty sure it's just facebook.com/theabercast. So, yep, that's it.